Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Stencil Saturday video. This week I am using a new stencil. It is called Dot and Dash Blocks. So the stencil itself, I kind of, have been thinking a lot. We've done some, in previous weeks, we've done some designs where we just use some of my other stencils and come up with these block designs, and it really got me thinking about what kind of stencil would work really well when its main purpose is kind of to create blocks. And so I designed this stencil to do just that. I have a couple other ones that I may end up making, because even now that I've just started playing with this, I see some things that I might like to have in addition to this, but I don't think that this could have had any more markings. I mean, there's a lot going on here, but they're all very useful. And as in previous videos, just because all those lines are there doesn't mean you're going to use them. So if you see this, if you look at this, I have kind of this on point square, and it kind of goes in, so you have all different sizes, because we're not always this outside. This is a 10-inch square, but of course we're not always going to have a 10-inch block. So I wanted these lines to be there, available to me for lining up, whether it's only going to come to this line, maybe it's a smaller block. And I also wanted radiating lines coming out of here, whether I choose just to do them or I just might have a very specific reason for those in the future, as well as these little dots. That's why it's called Dot and Dash, because I wanted dots that I can use, they're there in case I need them. And in this particular design, I should probably show you too the bottom. So the bottom, I wanted to make sure I used all of the piece of material that was available. And so you'll see on the bottom here, there are two smaller ones, which you could easily use as a border. But my plan was that you can mark this and then mark it again. So if you have a 10-inch square that maybe you want to be not as open, let's say, as the top one, then you'd have 4 smaller units to work with within this one square to create even more block ideas. So let me just move this out of the way, and you can see I have marked this here. This particular design, when I first got the proof for the stencil, I had a picture of it to draw on, and so I drew a little bit. And what I drew was a little bit complex to start with, so we're going to simplify this design a little bit. And for this particular block design, what we're going to do is actually more use these points than anything. So we're going to, and I mean, when I stitch it, you'll see what I'm talking about, because this probably isn't going to make a lot of sense. But what we're going to do is stitch from point. Wow, maybe I'll show you here because you see it better. So we're going to go from here to center to create these big elongated diamonds, which of course are going to get smaller as we go into the middle. So let me show you. I should probably stitch around the outside here first. I probably should have done that before I started. Boy, I feel like I'm getting less and less prepared as we go with these videos. So let me just stitch this real quick. So we do need to know where the outside is. I'm going to pretend it's a block. And we're definitely going to need to do a little fast forwarding in this one, because it would be way too long if I don't. have our square. I'm just going to re-stitch because I forgot where I wanted to start. I should have started up at the top here. Okay, so it really doesn't matter where you start. I mean, it's going to flow the same way. But I want to start right here. And I'm going to... Okay, so how we're going to start here is I'm going to stitch from this, there's a point there, and I'm going to stitch up to this point. And then we're going to travel to the opposite side of this diagonal line. So we're going to go line the ruler up. So we ideally want to land there. Oh, I went the wrong place. Did I? Yes, I did. Okay, first line I put in was totally to the wrong place. So I had to rip that line out. I went to the wrong dot. We want to go to the first dot on the outside. This is the problem, I think, with a new design. Kind of have to get the flow for it. So we're going to stitch right to here. Then I'm going to come from that point down to this corner point. And now, I mean, you may find that there's a path that works better for you, but I know I've said in previous videos, I like to work very methodically. So I'm going to work my way. So I'm going to go from this point to this point. Then we're going to come back out. So we're using 2 to create each half side of the diamond. So I'm going to stitch here to this point. Then I'm going to come back out to this point. They're just kind of zigzagging. Now to this point. We're going to do it one more time. We're going to come out to here. And then into this next one. Center point. Okay, so that's one side of it. You can see. Now we're going to repeat this, working our way back up to the top. We're going to do the same thing. So now I'm going to come from here up to this point. And now this side's a little bit easier because you know you're shooting for this point. So I'll just match that up. Out to this dot. So we're creating these really narrow diamond shapes. To that dot, and then let me trim this thread real quick here. Oh. Okay, and now we're going to go out to this final dot. Okay. So I now want to come down to this next one. So in order to do that, I need to travel somehow to get to the next one. And what I'm going to do is just stitch up to this point and then down, which, you know, it goes along with the design, but it also enables me to get where I need to be. It took me a while to figure out a path that made sense for me. Okay, so now that we're at this point, we're just going to do the same thing again. So I'll do one more. I'll stitch this whole one before I fast forward because I know it seems a little confusing. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go from this point up to this first outside point. Oh, stick into everything. Get out of the way. And then we're going to come back down to this point. And then zigzag down into the center. Going to center, back out. Just aiming for those dots. To the center, back out. And into this last one, where we'll now work our way back up the other side. And again, so it gets easier as you go, because now we have this point to go to for this side, and we also have these points on that side. So it's nice, I find, to have something, you know, visually there, the line of stitching that you know where you're aiming for. Just makes each one easier. And into this center. Out to the edge. Now, again, at this point, we're where we need to travel, because I want to go to the one over there. And I'm going to do that outside one where we come to this inner point. To there. Then down to the bottom center. And then I'm simply going to repeat that same process 2 more times for the remaining 2 like quadrants of this. Okay, so now that that is stitched, we do still have these corners. Now, you have a couple of options here. You could, you know, if you just want to keep this a little more open, one option would be to continue stitching, you know, maybe you stitch from this point to this point and back down until this is totally filled out. That would be a little more... And actually, well, I mean, you can do that. I think what I'm thinking I want to do is kind of stitch these lines in each corner, just to kind of give the block a frame. And I think I'll actually fill this in too as I go. You don't need to. I mean, there's plenty of stitching here. But I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to backtrack down here. And then I'll stitch this line. And then back down. What I like to do is kind of leave my ruler there and backtrack a little bit so I can do my fill and still have room to get back out when I come back down. I think I'll just do some pebbling in here. It's not a huge area, so it's not too much work to kind of fill these little tiny little areas in. And I think the frame and stuff, it's really going to make that center pop out a lot with this. Fill in here. And so what I'm doing is working my way back down here so I can continue into the next one. So at this point, I'm just going to backtrack on this line so I can get right down to here, and then backtrack down in until I come to this next frame line. So then I can stitch that to that point, all the way over, and then I'll backtrack a little bit again so I have room to stick my pebbles in here and then get back out. So I'll go ahead and finish out doing this around the whole block. Okay. Now that part is done. Can have a look at this. Now turn the light off so you can get a better look at what the block itself. You know what? Let me turn this other light on. Sorry. I mean, it's a really fun design, I think. I mean, it's, you know, it really, once you get the path down, and what I would suggest is doing some doodling before you start, just to get it, you know, or really even grab it, maybe your chalk pencil and kind of draw a couple, maybe draw one section out with the chalk, just so that you know, and can get the feel for the path. Because once you have it, it really isn't going to take very long. Now, I mean, I like the pebbling out here because I think it really accentuates the, I mean, the frame is there, so you really, this stands out and you have a nice frame and the fill. I would probably come in here and do something. Honestly, I might actually, let me turn this light back on here. I mean, you could stitch here. I mean, we have all these lines, so you have a lot of options here. Maybe I would just stitch the square. The other option, and actually that's probably, you know what, I think I'm just going to stitch real quick here. We will stitch, we're going to stitch the, we will do this square in here real quick. Get rid of this. And then one last little section here. Close it in. And then I actually think I'm going to go ahead and pebble this just so that it kind of brings the whole thing together. The pebbles will be in here to accentuate this main angular design. So then they match the outside, and it kind of lets this thing be kind of the showcase of the block. Just fill this in real quick. We got those a little too big, but that's all right. And you have a ton of options, obviously. If I know some people like things to be totally filled in with quilting and quilted to death, and you can certainly do that if that's what you'd like, because with these little narrow diamonds that we created, you could easily go back in to some of those if you wanted to, and fill them. You could, I'm going to turn this light off again because then we can see the texture a little bit better. Maybe you come in and you fill in these diamonds, or you do some other kind of a design in there, because then it would make these kind of little arrow shapes stand out. Or maybe you choose to do something in here and allow these diamonds to stand out. So that is entirely up to you. So I hope you guys liked it. I know that's kind of a lot. It's kind of intense, but it really isn't. I think that's the cool thing about a design like this. Once you get the path, it can be a little intimidating until you get the path down. But once you do, this would stitch out pretty darn quick. And, it looks super complex when in reality it really just isn't. You stitched from a point to a point to a point and created this cool design. So I hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.